the regular Ram 1500 is a bit of a lazy boy on wheels, then what does that make this thing? This is the Ram 1500 Rebel, a new addition to the range. And if we do a slow pan over it, it should be fairly obvious to you that this is a lot more outdoorsy, off-roady focused. But does that fundamentally change the character of this thing? And more importantly, if you're the kind of person who's been hungering for a high capacity tow rig, but you don't want to have to throw heaps of mods at it to make it off-road friendly, is this the big Yankee pickup that you've been searching for? We're going to find out today, but before we do that, let's go into what makes the Rebel a Rebel.
Think of the Rebel as being to a Ram 1500 what a Navara Warrior is to a regular Nissan Navara. It's got the same basic underbits as a 1500 Laramie Sport, but juiced up with some suspension hardware that's a little more appropriate for playing in the dirt. Key among these bits are a set of Bilstein dampers, with their own Rebel-specific tune that's geared more towards off-road prowess than on-road comfort. You also get 32-inch Falcon Wild Peak all-terrains mounted on 18-inch alloys, with their chunky tread and meaty sidewalls not only promising more grip on loose surfaces, but also more compliance than the lower-profile rubber on 20-inch alloys of the Laramie Sport. There are a few other differences that we'll go into in just a second, but what's most remarkable is that Ram isn't actually charging a big premium for all of this off-roady stuff. In fact, at $141,950 before on-roads, it wears the exact same price as the 1500 Laramie Sport. Now that ain't cheap by any means, but as you'll see, you're actually getting a pretty decent rig for the money.
Okay, let's be nerds and talk about geometry for a second, because when it comes to these full-size American-sourced utes, it's usually the sheer size of it that puts off a lot of people from taking them off-road. Now, with the Rebel, Ram has gone a little way towards fixing some of those issues, and it's mainly in terms of the approach, departure, and ramp over angles. They've addressed that by giving it a unique front bumper that's got a little bit of a better approach angle. They've deleted the side steps. You don't have the fancy motorized city boy side steps that you have on a Limited or Laramie Sport. And you also have a bit of a 1-inch lift, which gives you extra ground clearance. But in case that ground clearance isn't enough, we also have some underbody protection under the engine, the transmission, a transfer case, and fuel tank. But I will say that these aren't the thickest bash plates that I've seen bolted to an off-road ute, so maybe don't go too crazy. So there's no side steps on the side of this thing, so make sure you stretch your quads before you jump up into the cabin. It is a fair way up, but around the back, it's the opposite story, because they have given you a little bit of a step to use right there. And also, rather interestingly, we have a power-operated tailgate, which is probably the most bourgeois thing I can think of to equip an off-road ute with. But it's also quite large up in here. You have a spray-on bed liner, which is good for durability. Throw your stuff in here, don't worry about it. We also have a cargo management rail that's standard fit on the Rebel. But what you will also notice is that there is no Ram box storage system on this. That's what you get on the Laramie and the Limited. Bit of useful dry storage in the tub. A lot of people like it, but Ram Australia have decided that you might want to put things like a dirt bike in the back of this thing, and the Ram box would get in the way of that. I will also note that this is the lightest variant of the 1500 range. The Rebel is about 40 kilograms lighter than the Laramie Sport, which is not a huge difference, mind you, but considering that the GVM of this is actually the same as the Laramie Sport, that's 40 kilos that you can put towards things like food, fuel, or water, camping gear, all those things that you're going to need when you're taking this thing off-road. So that is useful and good to note. Also good to note, I'll just come down. Oh yeah, you just lift the tailgate and it kind of lifts itself up. Again, I don't know if that's a feature that the market wants, but what the market does want is down here, tow bar. This is probably the feature that a lot of you Ram buyers care about the most. There is no compromise with the Rebel. It will still tow 4.5 tons on a brake trailer on a 70mm ball. And that is probably the part of this video that you cared most about, so you can stop watching right now. Or continue watching, because there is actually quite a bit of suspension and driving, handling differences with the Rebel versus the other 1500 range. So let's jump in, let's go for a drive and chat about that stuff. All right, here we are behind the wheel of the Ram 1500 Rebel. Now, this is actually also my first experience of the new engine for the 1500, which is the Hurricane Inline 6, a twin-turbo petrol. You may have heard of it if you're a V8 fan. You may hate it, but what I'm going to tell you is that you probably shouldn't hate it. I mean, it's got 313 kilowatts and 635 newton meters of torque, and both of those numbers are pretty healthy in my opinion. So yeah, look, in terms of power and torque, you're not going to struggle. This is a really strong engine. I did have my doubts. I think the only thing that you'll miss is probably the noise. Because in terms of engine requirements, I think it's got plenty. But that's not the only reason that we're driving this car today, because it is the Rebel, it is off-road focused, so let's maybe go off-road and see what it can do, because the suspension of this is pretty different to what you get in the other 1500 models. As you can see from my head movement, the road we're on is not exactly smooth, but it's kind of filtering out a lot of the worst of it. Yes, there is some body movement, but it's not, I'd never call it egregious. It's actually pretty comfortable. It kind of rounds off a lot of the corners, if that makes sense, of a lot of these road imperfections. And there's a little bit of that body on frame shimmy that you might be used to when it comes to use of all size. I mean, that's not unique to the full size American utes. You definitely get it in a lot of mid-size things like Hiluxes and Rangers and stuff like that. But in terms of that shimmy, when you go over like a series of bumps or corrugations, particularly when you're kind of doing that at a little bit of an angle, it's not too bad. It's actually pretty hard to notice most of the time. So I think that bodes pretty well for those of you who are looking for a car that's going to be well suited to being a long distance tourer or a long distance tow rig. You know, you want that kind of stability to the suspension. You want that secure on-road feeling, and it definitely has that with this Rebel suspension, wheel and tire package. It actually works pretty well out here on the tarmac road. But I think what we'll do now is we'll get off the tarmac and just see how it goes. It's not the bumpiest dirt road I've ever seen, but we have some little lumps and bumps, and so filling a few corrugations through there. But coming up here is actually what I want to demo. It's a pretty decent little compression and it handles it great. Like the damping tune on these Bilsteins is actually pretty good, and I think when you go through something like that, you want that bump recovery, that kind of rebound damping to be just so that you don't end up just in this kind of sine wave loop of bouncing up and down, and the car just takes a long time to settle, which it can sometimes with these very heavy cars if they're on soft suspension. If the damping tune is not there to control it, then you can have that sort of repeated porpoising effect. And also we're driving along with an unladen rear. We don't have any cargo or any kind of weight in the back. So there's that. It might feel a little bit different once you have a little bit of load in the boot or in the tub, but right now it feels pretty good. Okay, so we've found a bit of an off-road segment that we're going to turn down. It's a little bit interesting. It's not going to be the world's tightest or most challenging bit, but I'll put it into off-road mode right now. And that's done just by a couple of buttons on the steering wheel. Interestingly, there is a manual shifter here. You wouldn't think it because I've got this weird kind of dial arrangement for the transmission selector. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but I was looking for the gear paddles. Usually you'd find some paddles or some kind of obvious manual gear selector option. I couldn't find it until I looked on the right side of the steering wheel. You've got a plus and a minus thing. That is your manual shifter. I've never seen anything like that before. Not really the best user interface, but you know, as we'll discover, you kind of don't really need to do that too much in terms of manual gear control. But I'll chuck it into four-wheel drive high. We're in off-road mode already. Let's go. Let's see how we go. So one thing that a lot of people like to hate on full-size American utes for is the fact that they are gigantic, and that's an objective fact. They are pretty big things. I mean, this thing has a 3.6 meter wheelbase, which is huge. So the idea there is that, you know, you're probably going to spend a lot of time grounding out on any kind of sizable ramp over. But to be honest, I'm not hearing anything from underneath. We do, like I said before, we've got some underbody armor to protect the vital bits from too much damage. But like I also said, it doesn't look like the thickest sheet metal out there, so I'm not going to go nuts. But so far, yeah, we're not making any kind of ground contact. So there's definitely enough ground clearance here to work with on this kind of mildly entertaining off-road trail. It's definitely muddy out there, but we're not really getting much in the way of wheel spin. We're just kind of crawling, and we are still in four-wheel drive high. I don't think there's really much of a need to go four-wheel drive low. You do also have a diff lock on the rear. That will get you out of a jam if you need it. No front diff lock though, it's just the back, so just bear that in mind. Yeah, so look, I see what you guys do out there, you 1500 owners, and the kind of modifications that you like to put in your cars. I think with the arrival of the Rebel, there's kind of maybe a diminished need for you to dip into the modification catalog so much, because I think with that kind of base capability that we've just sampled, and I will reiterate, this is not the most challenging off-road loop that I've ever done, but it's not entirely tame either. I think this would handle the majority of the kind of off-roading that most people would be wanting to do. Of course, there's going to be freaks out there who want to go really crazy off-road, and you're going to mod it, but again, like, this is probably not a bad base, especially if you want a vehicle that is going to be capable of towing 4.5 ton to somewhere remote, and you want a nice suspension to be able to deal with whatever kind of off-road or gravel road kind of stuff you need to endure to get to your destination. It's a good package for that kind of thing. Maybe if you don't have that huge towing requirement, there might be better choices out there. Things like Ranger Raptors or, Navara Warriors and gear like that. But if you do need to tow heavy things, but you also want to go pretty far into the bush, I think the Rebel it's kind of got that market to itself right now in terms of factory tuned utes. So yeah, the fact that it's also, the exact same price as the Laramie Limited, I think that's going to win over a lot of people, because you're not actually going to need to transact more to get into a vehicle that has more capability overall. And to be honest, like, going for the Rebel doesn't really cost you much in the way of its on-road handling or comfort or anything like this. Like, look at this interior. It's just as plush as any other 1500. Maybe it's missing a few of the toys that you might find in, the range-topping Limited. Has less chrome and stuff like that, but hey, if you're going off-road, who cares? No one's going to be impressed by chrome on your off-roader, so yeah. I think the Rebel is actually the one to get in the 1500 range. It actually feels the most complete and the most, on brand, if that makes sense. If I was shopping for a 1500, it's probably the thing that I would look at most favorably from my point of view. Anyway, I'll leave it there. You know what to do. If you have thoughts of your own, leave them in the comments, let us know, and like and follow and subscribe and all of that good online social media stuff. Thanks for watching. Catch you in the next one.